This particular video was made with some extra love because I filmed it for 30 whole minutes and realized all that footage was blurry, so I redid it. You're welcome. Hello beautiful people, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jasmine if you didn't know, and today I'm going to teach you guys how to administer and score the CELF 5. So let's go ahead and get started with the basics. The CELF 5 stands for Clinical Evaluation of Language Fundamentals, 5th edition. It is meant for ages 5 to 21, and it tests a variety of receptive and expressive language skills. The average time it takes to give this assessment is 34 to 42 minutes, depending on how many subtests you're giving and the age of the client. So let's go ahead and move on to what you're going to need to administer this assessment. First, you're going to need the record form. Please be sure that you have the correct age, as there are 2 different record forms for different age groups. There's one that goes from 5 to 8 and the other goes from 9 to 21. So next you're going to need the manual. Of course, this is great for all of those detailed instructions you might need. This is also where you're going to find all of the scoring information and anything else you need to know about this assessment. Next, you're going to need the 2 stimulus books. So majority of these subtests do require additional stimulus, and so this is where you're going to find them. If there is an assessment that doesn't need the stimulus, you'll have everything that you need in the record form. Lastly, these 2 things I feel like are kind of optional depending on how much of a deep dive you want to take into the CELF 5. Those 2 things are going to be the technical manual and the observational rating scale for parents and teachers to fill out about their client. So the CELF 5 is a very long assessment. So for the sake of time and clarity, I'm going to be choosing 1 subtest and 1 core language score to go over so that you feel ready to administer this test. So the first thing you're going to want to start with, of course, is the front page of the record form. At the very top, please make sure to put in all of the information about your client, such as their name, the school they go to, and most importantly, their chronological age. Make sure your chronological age is correct, because that's going to change a lot of things depending on where you start in the subtest, what subtest you give, and what record form that you're going to use. So before you guys get overwhelmed, because I know there are a lot of subtests here and a lot of things below the subtest, I'm just going to walk you through it. So right under the informational section, you're going to find the scaled subtest scores. And so these are great because you can give all of these scores and have an individual idea of what the client is doing in each one of these sections. But if you look right below the scale scores, you're going to find the core language and index scores. These are great to find an overall encompassing score of what the client may be able to do. So for example, if you wanted to find the core language score, you would only need to give the sentence comprehension, word structure, formulated sentences, and recalling sentences subtest portions of the assessment. So let's go ahead and move on to administering the subtest. I decided to teach you guys how to use the sentence comprehension portion of the assessment, which is found on page 3. So the CELF is really great because right at the top of every subtest they have a blue block that gives you all of the information you're going to need to know about how to assess this particular portion of the assessment. So let's just go ahead and go through the sentence comprehension portion. First, it's telling you where you should start based on the age of your client. So let's go ahead and say our client is 5'6". I'd look down at our first blue block and it says if he's 5'6", I'm going to start at item 1. So next, let's talk about your reversal rule, which equals the basal. For sentence comprehension, the reversal rule reads as follows: perfect score on 2 consecutive items from start point. If not, go back to item 1 and test forward. So basically it's saying that you have to have 2 correct answers from where you start, otherwise you have to go all the way to the beginning of the test and start scoring from there. The next section is repetitions. Repetitions are allowed for sentence comprehension and for most of the subtests, but please make sure that you are looking and making sure that repetitions are either allowed or not allowed, because that will definitely be important when you are administering certain questions. Lastly, let's look at the discontinue rule, which would equal your ceiling. For the sentence comprehension, the discontinue rule is 4 consecutive 0 scores. That is to say, if your client is doing well and then suddenly he gets 4 questions in a row that are incorrect, that is when you would end this portion of the CELF. So another really cool thing about the CELF is that it has the correct answers in bold. So that makes scoring super easy. So let's say you only go through the first time and circle the answer that the client has given you. So once you're going back, it's really easy to either score each question a 1 or a 0. Before we go back to the front page, let's take a quick look at sentence comprehension item analysis. The item analysis is going to be found after every subtest. It breaks down for you what each question was trying to target. So if you are going through this and you want to know specifically what the client had issue with, make sure you look at the item analysis table and it'll show you exactly what they targeted. So now we're going to take our raw score from page 3, sentence comprehension, and go back to page 1. And in that table, right under the client information, you'll see a section for raw score right next to sentence comprehension. That is where you want to put it. So like I said, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through every subtest. So I'm going to go ahead and insert some random numbers into the rest of the subtests we would need for the core language score. Now it's important for us to get the scale score for each of those subtests, which you'll find inside of the manual. So these scaled scores start on page 177. And remember, this is where chronological age comes in. Make sure that you have the correct age for your child, because depending on that age, you're going to be looking at different tables. So again, our kid is 5'6", so I'm going to look at the 5'6" table. So let's say I want to find the scaled score for sentence comprehension. I'm going to find the abbreviation SC for sentence comprehension. I'm going to go all the way down to find my kid's raw score. Let's say he got a score of 15. So I'm going to go from 15 over to the scaled score and reveal that he got a scaled score of 8. So that's when you're going to go back to page number 1 of that record score and put the scaled score right next to his raw score. In order to find the confidence interval, you're going to want to go to the bottom of the table and pick which one is your preference. I typically do 90 to 95, but it's totally up to you. So if I were to choose a confidence level of 90%, that means the plus or minus number is 2. In order to find the percentile rank for a particular subtest, you're going to want to go all the way to Appendix D, which starts on page 229. In that chart, you're going to look for the scale score of each subtest, and from there, it'll tell you the percentile rank that matches with that scaled score. So now that you have the scaled score and the percentile rank for the sentence comprehension portion of the assessment, you're going to want to go and do the same thing on that same table with all of the other subtests that you administered. So now that we have all of our scaled scores for our different subtests that we gave, it's time to put them all together in order to get the standard score for our core language scale score. So now what we're going to want to do is go down to the core language score portion of the record form, which is right here. As you can see, it's asking for the sum of the scaled scores. So you're going to want to enter your scaled scores from the table above into the white corresponding spaces. Once you're done, you're going to want to add those up and put them in the box that says sum scaled score. Now that we have the sum of our scaled scores, we're going to want to go to the core language scores and index standard scores in Appendix B. So remember your child's chronological age, because that's going to determine the table that you're using. You're going to find the abbreviation for whatever index score you're looking for. In this case, we're looking for the CLS. You're going to scroll all the way down and find the sum of the scaled scores. Then you're going to slide all the way over, which is where you're going to find your core language and index score, as well as your percentile rank. If you want the confidence interval for your core language score, you're going to find that all the way at the top of the table. So if we're using a confidence level of 90%, that number would be 5. So regardless of how many subtests you're giving or what index scores you're trying to find, if you repeat these steps that I showed you in this video, you're bound to get it right every time. If you guys are still having difficulties, feel free to go look in the manual, because it has such a detailed description of everything you're supposed to do. I hope you guys found this video helpful. If there are any other assessments you'd like me to teach you how to administer and score, feel free to leave them down in the comments. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down there as well. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful. Subscribe to my channel for more amazing content. And until my next video, peace.